This is the second part of a three-part interview we did with Cameron Edds, lead singer of the legendary 80s cover band, the Velcro Pygmies. If you haven't listened to the first part, definitely go back and check it out before you listen to this one.
On this episode, Cameron tells us his advice for new bands thinking about touring, the hardest and easiest types of crowds to win over, and how they manage to stay fit on the road.
We hope you all enjoy. Let's go.
Welcome to the people down south.
To the people down south.
Welcome 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 to the people down
Welcome
south.
to the people down south.
Podcast.
Hello, my fellow Americans.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Hang it, Bobby.
Hosted by Mark and Chris.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the People Down South podcast. I'm Mark, and that's Chris, and the purpose of this podcast is to highlight inspiring individuals and hopefully learn something from them in the process.
As we mentioned, this is the second part of a three-part interview we did with Cameron, the lead singer of the band, the Velcro Pygmies.
Cameron talks about some fascinating stuff on this episode. If you think you know what touring and being in a rock and roll band is like, you are probably way off from what it's like in reality.
So without further ado, here's the second part of our interview with Cameron Edds from the Velcro Pygmies. So if you were going to give somebody some advice about all this touring, what would you say is the number one most important thing about being a successful touring act?
Well, there are two types of people that do what we do. There are musicians and there are band guys. And I'm not saying that gender specific. I'm using band guys as anybody that does this because I know we live in this hyper politically correct world. But sometimes musicians are not great band guys, and sometimes band guys are not great musicians. But you've got to find a happy medium because you are going to be on the road doing things that have nothing to do with music about 5 times as much as you're going to actually be on stage. So there are people that have this really weird perception of what we do, like it's party and it's fun and all that. And people ask us, like, man, take me on the road. I'm going to go on the road and see what it's like. And they last about 3 days, and they're like, that's no fun. I don't want to do that. I told you it wasn't fun. It's a job. This is what we do. We work really hard so that we can be on stage for 3 hours a night, and then we work really hard tearing it all down. So as a good example, 2 weeks, we are going to drive 14 hours to Houston, Texas, to set up in the blazing hot sun for 3 hours so that we can play a 2-hour show and then tear down and drive 14 hours back home. You got to have a special stomach to be able to pull that off. That's not fun. And so my advice for people that want to do this, first of all, learn what it's really all about and see if you've got what it takes to pull it off. Because most musicians don't. It takes a band guy. It is a certain breed of humanity that can do what it is we do. Secondly, it's not a party. If your idea of being in a rock and roll band is that you're going to party all the time because you've read The Dirt or you've seen a video of Metallica or Guns N' Roses, that's not reality. That is the top 0.1% of people. Most people that live that life wind up dead or broke or both. So this romanticizing the rock and roll lifestyle is ridiculous. Keep yourself in shape and understand why you're doing it. If you want to be a purist and make music because you're going to change the world, then that's fine. But if you want to make a living at this and provide a service, then understand you are no longer playing music for you. You are playing music for your customers. And so give them what they need. And a lot of guys have a problem with that. A lot of guys are like, well, you know, I'm going to play the music that I want, and then I'm going to complain that nobody comes to see me. Well, you can fix that problem if you will just analyze your situation, who your market is, and play for those people. And sometimes, as obvious that is to the three of us talking right now, there's so many people out there, musicians, it's like speaking a foreign language to them. They just can't understand that. And that's why they won't last.
I can't imagine there's too many that actually understand that at the level in which you just described. But so you said it takes about 3 hours to set up your
Yeah.
average show. Is
Yeah,
that
our
fair?
rig is it's a 3-hour setup, and where we're playing, for instance, in see, it won't be that hot this trip, but we were setting up there once. It's an outdoor venue. It was 110 degrees. We were setting up for 3 hours in the blazing hot sun. Our soundman literally passed out, nearly had a heat stroke. It was crazy, but we do it, and we can't wait to do it again. And people look at us like, you are crazy that you would drive 14 hours to do that. Well, it's because there's going to be 3,000 people standing in front of us, jumping up and down, screaming, "Oh!" It is worth it to us because that's where we get our energy from. A lot of people just can't wrap their heads around why not just one person, but 5 of us would do it.
That's incredible. So tell me a little bit more about the character or on-stage persona of Cam versus the real person. Is there a distinction, and where's the
Yes,
friction in
absolutely.
everyday life between the two? I know you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier about not drinking, but can you expand upon that?
Well, when people see me out at the Walmart or at the Home Depot, which I visit almost every day, I always keep my hair up in a hat. I'm in cargo shorts and a T-shirt, and people are oftentimes either disappointed or really shocked. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you dress like a normal person," as if I would be going to the Home Depot in skin-tight blue jeans and fuzzy boots. I mean, that's ridiculous. So the character that I dress up as is definitely different. But I tell people, I say, well, I wouldn't want to go to a doctor that looks like me, but I wouldn't want my doctor to come see a rock band that looked like him. I want to provide them that character. And plus, within that character, that gives me a certain freedom to be a certain way and to sort of spin a certain perception that people may have about me, which is, oh, he's probably strung out or he's crazy or he's whacked out on some type of stimulant or something like that. And then when they discover that I do have depth, I do have opinions, I do follow the news and participate as a member of society and things of that nature, it really kind of shocks people. But there are elements of both versions in both versions. So I feel like I'm a very charismatic person, whether I am on stage or whether I'm talking to you right now. I feel like that I'm a very informed person, whether I'm talking to you or am on stage as well. And I think a lot of times people really enjoy that whenever I'll go into some type of a rant about things that are happening in the world. And I will talk about them sensibly. And I think people connect to that. They're like, oh my God, he's not up here waving a political flag. I never do that because I always want our audience to feel welcome. I want people to understand we don't care what it is that you believe. We just want you to believe something. And we want you to come to a Velcro Pygmy show with the freedom that if you disagree with anybody else in this room, that's fine, as long as we all agree that we're all here to have a good time. And that's why we put American flags on our stage. That's why I carry around 2 American flags that we've had with us for 17 years that are covered with thousands of names of current military members and ex-military members that we invite to sign the flag every night as a reminder that we get to do what we do because there are people out there willing to sacrifice their lives for the freedom that we enjoy getting to do this. So the character that I play on stage and the one that I'm off, other than the clothes that we wear, we're very similar.
Wow, that's fascinating, Cam. I'm curious, how do you get ready for a show? Do you have to get into character per se, or how do you get in that party mode to want to get out there and be entertaining and be extroverted?
You know, it's one of those things where originally I had a lot of anxiety about that, as I think young players do, where you're sitting at the hotel, you're getting ready, and oh my God, and you're second guessing, and is anybody going to show up? And I've learned as I've matured to let that go and let the moment unfold on its own. So whenever we walk into the room, that is when it happens, and it happens naturally. And it's more sincere when you let it happen naturally, as opposed to like doing jumping jacks or punching a punching bag and that kind of thing. I've never found that for me works. What works for me is walking into the room and seeing a room full of people that are there ready to have a good time and to be entertained. And that motivates me because every person in here bought a ticket because they enjoy what we do. And that's a very motivating thing. When there's somebody there that said, I worked all week long and I have chosen, because we only get 52 weekends a year. So you got 104 days a year. This individual chose one of their 104 days to spend it with the Velcro Pygmies. Not only spend their time, but their money. That really motivates me to think that person right there deserves a show. And so I get up there and I work hard for them. So that's what really gets me fired up. It's nothing that I have to do because it happens very organically and very naturally. And so many rookie players get discouraged if you show up and it's a quote, a slow night. Well, the people that came to see you are the ones that deserve the show, not the people that chose not to come. And so many bands will, and I get this all the time, when they'll be like, oh yeah, man, it kind of sucked tonight because nobody came. And I'm like, well, that's not the fault of the people that did come. They deserve 110% effort as well. They're the ones that did come. So we look at things based on a person's individual choice, what they wanted to do. And that's what motivates us. That's what fires us up every night, whether it's 2,000 people or whether it's 25 people.
So it's really the crowd and the performance aspect that energizes you and keeps you wanting to come back, right?
Yep, absolutely. And the fact that because we have built into our program the spontaneity that I discussed earlier, we never know what's going to happen. So it's always a new show for us too, because you never know what craziness is going to go on, because we force ourselves into a circumstance where we will not know what's going to happen. We have to react and respond sincerely, and that translates to the crowd because they see that it's not scripted, that it's sincere. Like, oh my God, these guys are like doing this off the top of their head. Well, yeah, because that's the way we've designed it.
Do you feel that you have to win the crowd every night? Is that something that you go in as like a goal, or there's some shows that are just going to be guaranteed engaged crowd for you guys?
So for instance, you're playing in depending on where the game is, you're in Auburn or you're in Alabama the night before the Iron Bowl. You don't have to win nobody over. They are ready to party. Now, but I love going into a brand new market where there's a lot of skeptics. And I love those audiences so much because I know that their expectation is one thing, and I know that we're going to deliver above what their expectation is. And watching an audience go from skeptics to fans is a really rewarding thing. And we work really hard to make that happen. The Velcro Pygmies never phone it in. We work too hard to phone it in. It's not worth it. What we do requires too much effort emotionally and physically to ever phone it in. If I was going to phone this in, I'd stop doing it. It wouldn't be worth it. It'd be too much work. So winning the crowd over is something that does still happen for us as we expand into new markets, but it's extremely rewarding and exciting and always a wonderful challenge, and we welcome it. It's one of our secret weapons is that we always seem to succeed in winning a crowd over because our delivery is so unique in a market where entertainment has become a lost art.
It's almost like the hard work that you said earlier, some people might associate with being a downside. It all is like a benefit for you. You know, you've driven so far, we've set up all this stuff. Like, hey, we're excited to go in and do this. Is that a fair statement?
That's right. That's exactly right. I see kids all the time, and I call them kids because I'm a dinosaur now, but I see kids all the time that they want to do this, but they do not want to put in the effort. Then it's not going to happen. That's heavy. That equipment is heavy, and you know it's hot outside, and I didn't get to eat, and I didn't get much sleep last night. A bunch of excuses because it's a bunch of tenderfoots out there, and you can't be a tenderfoot and do this. You've got to work. I mean, there are times when we will get up, drive all day. If we have a problem during setup, there's no dinner. There may not be any sleep because all we care about is putting on a show. We're not worried about eating or sleeping or any of that. Everything is focused on that show. And everybody in our band is the exact same way and fully understands that. We don't have any complainers. There's no crybabies because there's no time for it. We just don't have time for a whiner in a rock and roll band. There's just no room for it. It's kind of like being in the military. There's just no time for it. And if somebody's a whiner, then they're a weak link, and that's just going to hurt the overall package.
So, Kim, how's the show changed over the years? And I guess you could say the band, too, with members you've added and things like that. But how's the show or the band changed over the years?
Well, when the band first came out, we would have been more Black Crowes, not musically, but the presentation of it, still intense. And now we're more over the top, right out of the blocks Poison, where everything is just to the 10th degree. And that was on purpose. I wanted the big lights. I wanted the big hair. I wanted the flashy guitars. I wanted the flashy clothes. So the band has evolved to be even more of what we were. It just gets more intense, more intense, more intense. And with every increase in intensity, it's been more appealing to the audience because I think in general, at least in the rock scene, it's gone the other direction where it's become less intense and more watered down and more guys in T-shirts and blue jeans. It's like rock music has lost its pageantry. And as it loses pageantry, we've added to it because I think people enjoy a show. They enjoy that part of it. They enjoy looking up and seeing characters. You know, I never want my guys to walk into the bar or into the venue and people not know they're in the band. I want my guys to walk in the bar and be like, okay, that guy's obviously in the band. Obviously, or he wouldn't be looking like that.
Well, and how about the audience? How's the audience changed over the years?
It has expanded downwardly age-wise. So we've retained all of our mature fans that grew up with us in college. We've maintained all of them, but now we're attracting audience members that are 7 years old, 13 years old. They're starting to discover this type of music. And they're starting to discover not only the music, but the way it's being presented to them. And when these kids live in a TikTok world, where their senses have to be hyper engaged, that's what we've always been. And so we appeal to that because there's a lot of activity, a lot of movement. And I mean, we're the perfect band for an ADHD society because there's so much going on. Something is catching your attention, but it's fleeting so that you can pay attention to something else. So that has a wide appeal to that younger audience. So that's why we've been able to span generations from parents to grandparents and now grandkids. And it's really pretty remarkable.
So I've had a lot of people tell me things like, oh, well, the 90s was just a crazy time. Like everyone was partying, having a good time. Is there a particular year range that you would say, since you've been doing this, that's been, I guess wilder than others in terms of like people coming out and being engaged, or has it just grown?
Well, it would have been in the mid 90s where I would say the peak of people just going out. And a lot of that was economic because you could count on 4 days a week. People would go out Wednesday through Saturday. And then there were some economic issues that occurred. And now where people used to go out maybe 3 days a week, now they're only going out 3 days a month. And so that dramatically changed some things. Also, the way that the universities started to really clamp down on the private events, that dramatically affected the way that the kids partied. So suddenly you weren't having live band frat parties. Now the kids were just partying in their apartment complexes with a boombox and a case of beer. And so everyone kind of changed their entertainment choices. And a lot of the live band stuff where most of this enthusiasm was coming from started to go away. And we play for kids now. We were in Florida State, and it was like we were playing for people that had never seen a band before. I mean, their eyes were big, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is actually happening, because they had not experienced in so many years. And the thing about a college community is that it flips every 4 years. So if a college audience, if Alabama goes through a 4-year period where the band market has been depressed, you've just suddenly taken a whole generation there, a whole graduating class that doesn't know anything about live music. And so you've really got to stay on top of that sort of thing. And there's a lot of exerting pressures and forces that affect what we do that we don't have any say-so in. If the University of Alabama decides that they're not going to allow fraternity parties, or Tennessee. I mean, they ran every fraternity party off campus at Tennessee. And that used to be one of the most vibrant live music campuses that we played. And now it's the deadest.
Wow.
So those types of things have changed now, where in the mid-90s, they were peaking, man. It was crazy. It was insane. And I would love to get back to that point of view because I think the kids need it. I think when you go to college, an education is just something that you get by accident from 4 years of socializing, you know.
I mean, would you rank any particular area as being particularly vibrant in that scene now? You know, me and Mark spend a lot of time in Athens, but is there some other place that you would rank?
Here's the problem with Athens, in my estimation. There are probably 300 bars in Athens, and there probably should only be 5. And so what you wind up with is you've got everybody so split up that it's difficult to have a real groundswell of anything there. I prefer the communities where you've got like your Georgia Theater that's going to be bringing in, you know, the big names. And then you may have a couple of other smaller clubs that would bring in kind of local or regional artists, and everybody goes there. But as soon as you start to divide that population with 25 kids here, 25 kids here, 30 kids over there, before you know it, nobody ever has a good night anymore. Everybody always has a mediocre night. You get into a place like Tuscaloosa where, well, Auburn's probably even a better example. Auburn has basically 2 places. They used to have 3. Now they got basically 2 places. But from the standpoint of being an on-fire live music campus, they're all about the same right now. I'm not seeing anybody that's just killing it like they used to. One of the things that has also happened is a lot of these fraternities have moved into getting national acts. I mean, Luke Bryan was playing frat parties, Cole Swindell, you know, those guys, Eric Church. I mean, those guys were literally playing frat parties just a few years ago because the kids, where they were having parties every Friday and Saturday, suddenly were limited to a couple of parties a year. So they were just putting all their money together and going big and bringing in. I mean, we played in Athens for the Kappa Alphas, and they brought in a rapper. And the rapper was only going to perform for 45 minutes. And we were going to play for our regular 2-3 hours. And when we found out what the budget was, it was like $100,000 for this one party. It was crazy. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe. But that was because they were having to get all the partying in one day. Whereas they used to spread that budget out over an entire semester. Now they're just going big or going home.
Well, what about like the types of shows? You know, what would you rank as the hardest types of shows? Hardest to easiest? For example, college bars or like a wedding or frat party.
As far as hardest to perform at, or
hardest to win the audience? Which are the ones that are at the top? You're like, oh, this is going to be easy. And then you might get like a corporate or a wedding. You're like, oh man, this is going to be some work. I got to work the crowd.
The most difficult parties, and we don't get many of these because we usually turn them down because we know they're going to be difficult, are going to be large company corporate events. And I tell you why. So for instance, there's a huge insurance company, I think it was Aflac or somebody like that, but they had their corporate party. It was in Dallas, Texas, and it was at the House of Blues. So they invited us in to play. Well, what happened was you've got everybody there that is at the corporate Christmas party, but nobody is willing to cut loose because they're afraid of what's going to show up on social media, what the boss is going to think, because we live in this tattletale society. So there's no way to ever get a party going because everybody's like, you know what? As much as I want to have a good time, it's not worth getting a picture of me having a good time and that showing up on Facebook. It's just not worth it. And it's funny because the band has a really big audience in Dallas. So a lot of the people that were at this party are people that we see all the time in Dallas, and none of them were acting like we normally see them because they're too afraid. And so events like that are really tough, and that's why we try to shy away from them. Those would be basically a situation to where somebody just will not take no for an answer and finally pays us enough to do it. When people call us to play their wedding, we always talk them out of it. You don't want us. You do not want us for your wedding. Yes, we do. No, you don't. You do not. You saw us at a bar. You were drunk. You thought it was funny. But look, your grandma, your grandpa, they're not going to like what we do. No, we got to have you. Got to have you. And after about 4 times of insisting that they not get us and they demand it, we finally do it. And that's why we don't do many weddings. But the ones that we do always turn out to be good because we've gone into it and explained it to the buyer exactly what they can expect. You know, in the middle of the show, we can't bust into Michael Bublé. That's not going to happen. We don't have that. You know, it's going to be a rock show. So if you want a rock concert at your wedding reception, that's fine. But don't expect, we're not going to show up in black ties and tuxedos. That's not what we do. Because then you're not buying the Velcro Pygmies. If you want the Velcro Pygmies, then that's what you're going to get. If you don't want us or you want us in tuxedos and other things, then you don't want us. You want somebody else.
Love it.
So to answer your question, the corporate events where everyone is so afraid and looking over their shoulder, those are the hardest ones to get the crowd to cut loose in.
Awesome. What's the easiest ones?
Easiest is going to be any vacation destination. So, for instance, if we're at the beach, easy, because everybody is there to have fun. That's why they're in that space. So if we're performing in Houston, and that's somebody's hometown, well, there's a chance that, you know, they're just coming out for Saturday night. Maybe they had a bad week or whatever, and you may have to work a little harder to break them out of the mentality, the weak mentality. But if you're at the beach and you're down there and you're on vacation, you've already won that crowd over. They're already there. The fact they're in the bar lets you know, hey, I'm here and I'm ready to have fun. And those crowds are always the easiest to make happen.
What are some of the common problems that you guys get on the road or struggles on the road? You know, like getting fat because you might be eating fast food, or hungover bandmates, or situations where you have bad hotel rooms or things like that. What are those common problems or struggles?
Hotels can oftentimes be a struggle just simply because for whatever reason, it seems to take forever to check into hotels now. But it always seems invariably difficult to do that. A lot of times the struggles, and this only happens once, because once we're in a club once, they know what to expect, but they don't realize how extensive our show is, and so they may not be adequately prepared, whether it's power or staging or just load in. If we have to load stuff up steps, that adds 3 hours to the load in, just because we got to carry things up steps. So challenges like that, there's always traffic issues. When you travel as many miles as we do, invariably you're going to run into traffic jams, and then that's going to slow you down and back you up. And so just these little tiny things, it's never really anything big. We've never been plagued with any major illness or anything like that, but there's the occasional stomach issue that can make for a challenging night where one of the band members, you know, ate too much crawfish or something like that. And, you know, that turns into a weird deal on stage where they have to excuse themselves a couple of times. But for the most part, you know, we've kind of got it figured out, and it's never anything really big. It's always something little that's a nuisance, but nothing major, really.
Interesting. What about staying fit on the road?
It's weird. When you are in our band, you naturally get fit because we work so hard. We don't eat much because we're always busy. And the show itself is 3.5 hours to 4 hours long straight. Most bands take breaks. We don't take breaks. I got rid of breaks in this band 20 years ago. I felt like that they were disrespectful to the audience. I never understood why a musician felt like that he should be able to get on stage and play for an hour and then take a 30-minute break. That's never made sense to me. I know it's not that hard. So I feel like that when a band takes a break, it's disrespectful to the audience that paid to come see a band. They didn't come to hear break music. So that's one of the things that keeps us in shape, because when you're jumping around for 3 hours, when you're doing aerobics exercise for 3 hours at night, that'll burn a whole lot of calories. And then you've got the physical aspect of setup, which is another 3 hours, and then the teardown, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours. So, you're looking at 8 hours of physical effort every time we perform, and that'll burn off a lot of Cheetos. That's for sure.
Oh, that's too funny. That's too funny. Are you tired of singing any particular songs? I mean, are you tired of 80s rock at this point?
Every song we play, if it came on the radio, I would turn it off. But that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy playing them. I don't want to hear them, but I love to play them because the way the audience responds to them. So we can play Journey's Don't Stop Believin' forever, and I will never get tired of hearing the audience sing it. So, yes, I'm tired of hearing the songs and would not listen to them, but I'm not tired of playing them. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That makes sense. And if you could front one of the legendary 80s bands, which would it be? Like your Motley Crue, Poison, Van Halen, 100%?
It'd be Van Halen. It'd be Van Halen, without a doubt. David Lee Roth is kind of the persona that I've always gravitated to because he's just the rock star. David Lee Roth just, to me, summed up rock star. He wasn't that great at being a singer, but he was an incredible entertainer, and he was captivating. And, one of my favorite quotes of David Lee Roth are, "Nobody goes and gets a hot dog when I'm on stage." And that's so true. I mean, he was just so, people could connect with him, and they just thought that he could dodge bullets and leap tall buildings and walk on water and all that because he created this larger-than-life image. So, yeah, I wouldn't hesitate. Van Halen would be the one that I would want to be a part of.
So, Cam, is it safe to say that that's your favorite 80s band as well?
Not really. Not necessarily. Whenever it gets into, like, my favorite type of music, I get this question a lot, and people would just assume that it would be an 80s band. But I'm a huge Elvis Presley fan. I'm a huge Prince fan. Very big fan of the Commodores and Earth, Wind and Fire. Love Frank Sinatra, Harry Connick Jr. Big fan of Harry Connick. Love a lot of that yacht rock kind of stuff. And so I enjoy that. And then I'm a really big podcast news junkie. So music consumes a lot of my life because it's my profession. But from an entertainment point of view, I usually choose other things for entertainment. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't still listen to music, but when I do, it's probably not going to be the genre that we actually play. I enjoy country. I like the Luke Combs stuff. I listen to that. A lot of the stuff that Bradley Jordan promotes, I listen to that stuff. I try to listen to the things that I don't play because I'm kind of overwhelmed stylistically because that's what I do. It's kind of like being a commercial airline pilot. You don't go fly a private plane on your day off because you get to fly planes all the time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But what about like current music? Is there anything that you are particularly interested in or any like up and coming bands other than the ones you just mentioned that you're listening to these days?
Not really, to tell you the truth. Nothing has really piqued my interest a lot. I respect what is out there and I respect the way that it's being created, but I think a lot of it's very fabricated. The olden days, back in the days of, say, bands like Def Leppard or Kiss, Bon Jovi, those guys, they would put out records, and if the record failed, they would put out another record. And there would be bands that would be 4 albums deep into a record deal before they'd ever have a hit. That doesn't happen today. Today, you put out a single on Spotify. If it doesn't get 1 million downloads, then you never get another shot. And I really hate that music has gone that route, that it's become so disposable that people never have the opportunity to develop their identities. You go back and listen to early Kiss stuff, or any artist for that matter, and you can hear how bad they were, but they had the ability to evolve and grow into what they are. Artists don't have that today, where so many of these young guys or girls or artists are being found in malls or in cattle call auditions, and they've got a song that's already been written, it's already produced, and they've already got image consultants and all that stuff, and it's all taken care of. And those people had nothing to do with it. They're just puppets. And I hate that about it. the organic nature of rock and roll has really kind of vanished. And I think it's interesting that the only bands that can still fill stadiums are the same bands that used to fill stadiums. And I think that that is something people need to be aware of. Why is it that Bon Jovi and Kiss and Def Leppard and Poison and Guns N' Roses are the only bands that can fill stadiums? The bands that are in the top 10, they're not filling stadiums. It's all these old guys. And so that ought to be evidence that, hey, wow, maybe the way we used to do it was a better way of doing it. And I think because we've gotten to such a digital world now that, hey, we'll throw it out there, promote it on Spotify. If it goes, great. If it doesn't, who cares? We'll just destroy this person's life because they didn't get 1 million downloads.
Wow, that was some interview. I was fascinated by how intense it is to tour and the work that goes into setup.
I was surprised by how they naturally get fit in the band by having to do all of that physical work. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Be sure to catch the last part where Cam gives us the real story behind the Velcro Pygmies name, the strange hobby that he does in his free time, and how he deals with online haters.
Make sure you click to subscribe to the show with your podcast provider, and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate it. Also, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter so you can stay up to date with everything we do. All links can be found at peopledownsouth.com.
And if you happen to know anyone personally who you think we should interview for the podcast, we'd love an introduction. Email us at team@peopledownsouth.com. And as always, the views and opinions expressed by our guests on the podcast are theirs and do not necessarily reflect our own.
We are your hosts, Mark and Chris, and you have been listening to the People Down South podcast.
See y'all next time.
See y'all next time.
See y'all next time.
See y'all next time. See y'all next time.
See y'all next time.
See y'all next time.